More than 100 protesters clashed with police outside the Minerals Forum in Dunedin today, blocking dozens of delegates from entering the building. The human blockade stranded many outside for hours, although organisers insist it's had little impact on the forum, which welcomes 300 delegates over 3 days. Our reporter Tess Brunton was at the protest.
It was still dark this morning when protesters began chanting outside the Dunedin Town Hall. Clutching musical instruments and waving placards, they blocked the entrances to the Minerals Forum as police and security staff stood close by. Abby Spilg-Harris from Stop the Minerals Forum Coalition says the protest is about making a stand for future generations.
I'm sure a lot of these people who are in here would have loved to have praised the kids who were out for the climate strike, and yet we've got a lot of those kids here today with us again saying please don't, but they don't want to actually hear that coal's a dying industry and that we're in a climate crisis. So that's not what they're here to discuss today. They're here to discuss more exploitation of the land, more mining, business as usual.
Some delegates arrived at 6 a.m. to avoid the protesters, while others tried to barge their way through the human barricade and metal barriers, but many waited for police escorts. One protester superglued their hands to an entrance door to protest the forum.
I saw that they had the bolt cutters here and I knew that they were going to cut the bolts, and I thought if I'm superglued, surely they won't open the doors. If they do, then they will rip my hands off.
A group of firefighters and police pushed through the crowd, trying to cut chains on the door with bolt cutters and remove the protesters' hands. But they stopped when they realised what had been done. Police pushed towards a different door with delegates following closely behind, forming a crush with some protesters falling to the ground and one woman needing medical treatment. 3 protesters were pushed in by the surging crowd. The police confirmed they were arrested for disturbing the peace. Jenny Olsen was one of them. Ms Olsen wants to kick coal to the curb.
We would like to see coal phased out altogether. The problem with this conference is that there will be discussions about expansion of coal mining, and that is why we are here.
Protester Chris Naylor says the forum delegates are on the wrong side of history and being willfully blind.
The scientific evidence is in. We're actually in a climate crisis. Business as usual is no longer an option. We can't do it. And yet these guys just think they're going to squeeze every last dollar out of the coal and oil industry. And to hell with the climate, to hell with our children, to hell with our grandchildren, to hell with us.
Metro Cinema owner-operator John Wilson supports their message, but says he was forced to close his business because of the protest.
It's quite intimidating for the patrons to come into the theatre. Police across the doorway. You might get a protester come in the guise of being a patron and then just trip the alarms for the fire service, which closes down the whole town hall.
Mr Wilson says closing during the conference could cost him up to $1,400. Delegates stuck outside said the protest was a nuisance but wouldn't stop the forum. Straterra Chief Executive Chris Baker says the protesters didn't cause much of a disruption and have a right to speak out.
I don't agree with the protesters that we just have to stop mining coal that's used for steel making. The solution then would be worse than the problem. As we transition away from steel being made with coal, that'll dictate what the demand for coking coal is. Us stopping it unilaterally will not change that demand.
In the end, just before midday, the protesters abandoned blocking doors to bash on tin, metal poles and blare alarms to get their message across. The Minerals Forum will continue tomorrow. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Tess Brunton, TNA.